Oh, boys. Ho, ho, ho. Thank you, Kojima-san. Is that racist? Death Stranding 2 is here. And I've been playing it, and oh my god. Now, the first Death Stranding game was divisive. I have been nothing but vocal about how I felt about Death Stranding 1. Everybody that is into video games will probably tell you that they are a fan of Hideo Kojima. Now, I say the same thing, but what I mean by that, actually, is that I am a huge fan of the Metal Gear Solid series. I am a huge fan of everything that Hideo Kojima did to make those games the best, most cinematic games ever created. There's only a few things that I have become truly obsessed with in my life. I'm not talking about things that I like or even things that I do super often. I'm talking about that deep obsession where you have to own everything that exists within that franchise. The type of thing that when people think about you, they synonymize you with that thing. For me, that was Korn, the late 90s, early 2000s new metal band. No, but seriously, there are limited things that I have become seriously obsessed with in my life. Korn was one of them. Metal Gear Solid was the other. And I think when people say they love Kojima, that is what they're talking about. Because, yeah, Kojima has been involved in other projects, but I've not become obsessed with those projects. I've not even played most of those projects. Outside of Metal Gear Solid, for me personally anyway, Kojima was unproven. And that really never dawned on me until I played the first Death Stranding. So I got the game on launch, loaded it up, and I didn't get it. I really struggled, especially with those first few hours of the game. And then in some stroke of luck for Hideo Kojima, I dipped my head underwater in a hot tub on a cabin getaway with my wife. I caught the world's nastiest ear infection, which literally collapsed my ear canal, and I had to spend a night in hospital. And then for the 2 weeks that followed, I had to take time off work. I had to have this compact piece of material in my ear canal that over the course of 2 weeks would gradually expand and reopen my ear canal. It was fucking awful. The pain was excruciating. I could barely concentrate on anything. But you know what I could concentrate on? Hideo Kojima's walking simulator. I hate it when people call this game a walking simulator, even though it was a fucking walking simulator. It was a delivery simulator. It was DoorDash in the apocalypse. But because of that illness, and literally I couldn't really do anything else, I just was sat still in a lot of pain, doing this like monotonous gameplay loop. Bro, I became addicted. So I ended up actually really loving Death Stranding 1, but the question remained and lingered afterwards. Would I have enjoyed that game had I not come down with that illness? And should it take something like that for me to be able to connect with the game? And the answer for me was like a resounding no. Now, while we're being real, what I seem to consistently see from video game journalism, and also just like people who have played the game and put the time in to do it, it's almost like nobody wants to admit that a Hideo Kojima game was not their favorite thing in the world. But again, for me, Death Stranding 1 was Kojima's moment to prove to the world that his genius expanded beyond the confines of Metal Gear Solid. And it didn't. For me, it did not do that. Like, I would rather play any of the Metal Gear Solid games any day of the week than I would play Death Stranding 1. Death Stranding 1 was just okay. This, however, is a different beast. And I'm seeing a lot of people talking online about how much better it is than the first one. But for whatever reason, and maybe it's just the videos that I've watched, but people can't seem to pinpoint the reason why. And there are multiple reasons, there are multiple improvements to the game, but there is one specific reason why I think Death Stranding 2 is leaps and bounds in front of the first one. And something that I think a lot of sequel developers should look at and be like, we could do this too. So we started playing Death Stranding 2 at the time of filming this last night on stream. I also continued to play some off stream. We're not super far into the game or anything like that, so I don't want you to think that this is a review, but it's still clearly obvious to me how and why this game is such an improvement on the first one. And I think also, just to preface all this as well, personally, I think since 2019, my sort of gaming outlook has slightly changed as well. I think in 2019, I was probably a lot less open to just sort of simulation games. I was a lot less enamored by the grind. But since 2019, I've spent a lot of hours on Final Fantasy XIV. I've spent a lot of hours on World of Warcraft. I've spent a lot of hours on survival games. I've spent a lot of hours grinding. Given that, plus the things I'm going to talk about here, is why Death Stranding 2 suddenly it feels like a game that I am desperate to play all the time. So first I'm going to go through some of the things that I've noticed that I think are just improvements to the game, generally speaking, and then at the end I'm going to talk about the one big thing that I think is the real reason why this game stands out from the first one. Death Stranding 2 is a pure masterclass in sequelology. You kind of expect to see it in all games, really, don't you? You expect them to take the concept of the first game and expand on those ideas. And Kojima and the gang have done that like in spades. They have done so much of that on Death Stranding 2. One of the things that I really struggled with on the first Death Stranding was the pacing. The first few hours of the game were so boring, man. Death Stranding 2 jumps into the action instantly, almost straight away. And in that first mission, you kind of have everything to contend with straight away. You have to get from point A to point B. There is an unavoidable area that is a bandit camp. The game doesn't give you hours and hours of walking around just figuring out the terrain and the delivery systems. The game gives you a little sprinkle of it in your introduction, and then it says, hey, here's all this other shit as well. You are forced to either engage in stealth or combat or a combination of the two in your very first delivery. And that's huge because for me, the first time round, the action moments of the game were like sprinkled in. They almost felt out of place in context with the rest of the game because you spent so long and so much time doing one thing that when the gameplay loop was broken into this like, this is an action sequence now, here's a boss that you have to fight, it almost felt like they hadn't taken that element of the game seriously enough themselves. Death Stranding 2, we're in it. These things are like focused parts of the game that are an enrichment to the experience. And the combat in this one has taken a big step up. There are new weapons in the game, like a fucking tar cannon. And honestly, the enemy like compounds, certainly the ones that I've got to so far anyway, it reminds me so much of Metal Gear Solid 5. And the thing that I loved about Metal Gear Solid 5 was finding myself a vantage point, getting my scope out and figuring out where the enemies were, how I was going to infiltrate the place, whether I was going to engage in combat, how I was going to move, if there were certain things within the compound that I felt like I wanted to collect. All of that exists here in Death Stranding 2, and it is so satisfying. It's such an exciting moment and part of the gameplay loop when you arrive upon one of these enemy camps and the decision that you make of how you're going to tackle that situation. And some of the battles are intense, brother. Intense. We also have a bunch of new enemy types that weren't in the first game, like Watchers. Watchers will summon enemies. We have armed survivalists. We even have a bunch of new like creatures, like chiral creatures, jellyfish, bats, spiders. There's just much more to contend with on an action front. There seems to be a bunch of new mission types in the game as well. Things like monorail repairs, even animal rescues. There's new gear and vehicle upgrades. You can have turrets on your vehicles now. I'm not going to go through all the upgrades right now, but there's a bunch of cool new stuff in there that I'll let you guys discover for yourself. But one thing is connectable ladders. You can also enhance your gear to improve things like combat and improve things like stealth. And then I think like the biggest and most impressive general upgrade is the environmental upgrades. We have a day and night cycle. There wasn't a day and night cycle in Death Stranding 1. That's crazy to think about. You're now kind of against the clock. But for a game like Death Stranding, it's such an improvement to have a day and night cycle in there. We now have a bunch of like world events that can happen, like landslides, dust storms, earthquakes, and all of these impact gameplay. They impact your functionality and your mobility whilst these things are going on. And it's just everything that they did in the first game, they have expanded on and done better. But the thing, it's time to talk about the thing. The one thing that they have done in Death Stranding 2 that is an absolute game changer. It's the character reset, or the exclusion of the character reset. How many sequels have you played where you spent 30 plus hours on the first game building up your character to be this fucking immortal god, or at least building up your character to be able to comfortably take on anything that was thrown at you within the game environment? And then you come back to the second one and the game has to like come up with some sort of trope or narrative explanation, or sometimes it barely even explains away at all the reason why all of the fucking powers or skills or tech that you gained in the first one is now gone. And that's not even a bad thing. Like, games do that all the time. That is the normal, regular way to do things, and it's great a lot of the time. But here, Death Stranding 2 does not do that. Instead, though, coming back to the world of Death Stranding, when you pick up the pad and start playing as Sam, you actually feel like Sam has learned a bunch of shit from his first time out. Sam feels more powerful. Sam feels stronger. Sam has new movement abilities that make the character movement feel more fluid and easier to do. Sam can now dive, Sam can now slide on his knees, Sam can now tackle enemies, Sam can more easily move into cover. It feels like there's a level of continuity out of the first game into the second game. You don't feel like you're playing a different Sam. You don't feel like you've been stripped of any of the things that you worked towards in the first one. You actually feel more powerful. This is a more powerful, more enhanced version of Sam than we had in the first Death Stranding. And what that means is that rather than refreshing the character or defreshing the character, as it were, it means that the gameplay loop, the environments itself have all been brought up to where Sam is now. And that's really fucking cool, because now it's like everything else is better. Sam has improved mobility. He now has new holsters for his weapons. It's like Sam was there in the first game, which is crazy to say because he fucking was. But that's something that is kind of overlooked by so many developers in so many other games. My other favorite games, aside from Metal Gear Solid games, are the God of War games. God of War 2018, God of War Ragnarok, two of the best games ever made. But I remember thinking multiple times at the start of God of War Ragnarok, Kratos, brother, you've done this shit before. How do you not know what's going on here? Because your character's having to like relearn the world of mechanics as if from scratch. But here, it feels like that level of continuity, like Sam was there the first time round. So for example, now, if I'm going into a bandit camp, I can put my bag down. I can think, I'm just going to go in with my weapon. I'm going to clear this camp out, but I'm going to leave my cargo in a safe space so that it's not all falling off my back and getting busted up whilst I'm in combat. Do you know what that is? That's common sense. The kind of common sense that a character who had done this shit before would think. It's like Kojima has sat there and thought about, how can I improve Death Stranding in every single way for Death Stranding 2? And then he's almost like put himself inside the mind of Sam himself and thought, if Sam Porter was going to go out on and do all this shit again, how would Sam Porter make things better for himself? I just think it's really fucking smart. It allows everything about the gameplay to step up 5, 6, 10 levels. Everything about Death Stranding 2 is bigger, better, more immersive than Death Stranding 1. So if, like me, there was things about Death Stranding 1 that you loved, but also things about Death Stranding that you didn't really love, there's a good chance that in Death Stranding 2, those things that you didn't love so much are going to have been taken care of. I'm not going to lie to you and say that it doesn't still follow that same mechanic of having to take parcel from place A to place B, but everything in between now is so much more enthralling for the player. And that is why you all need to get on Death Stranding 2 right now. I'll probably do a proper review once I've finished it or once I've played a hell of a lot more of it, but now is not the time to be fully reviewing the game. They're my early thoughts. It's fucking awesome. Kojima, well done. You have firmly established yourself as the king of video games once again. This time without carrying the Metal Gear torch. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, we're still streaming 3 times a week over on Twitch as well, so you should go follow over there if you want some of that live action. Again, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. We are almost at 1K subscribers, which sounds like a tiny amount to you guys, but to me, that is like crazy. I can't wait to hit that milestone. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.